We have lots of NHL news and rumors to take a look at today, including a big day on the NHL waiver wire. We have 3 names on waivers today who can be picked up. We'll discuss that, plus lots of moves within the NHL rosters today, including some updates on Valeri Nichushkin with the Avalanche, Matt Poitras and the Boston Bruins. Anthony Mantha suffered a substantial injury, plus we get updates on players like Austin Matthews, Max Pacioretty, and Shea Pinto. Some more questions and answers, hopefully, around the upcoming changes that will impact CHL players having NCAA eligibility. Plus, could we see some drastic moves out of Pittsburgh? Another dramatic game going down tonight after the first period, losing 6-0 to the Dallas Stars. A lot of talk about, maybe some big moves coming out of there, whether it be a coach or a trade. Could a familiar face return to the Ottawa Senators from the Penguins? That was a hot topic on debate on social media in the last 24 or 48 hours. We'll give kind of the general thoughts around that and how it could work or not. And a big Habs rumor involving a new member of the coaching staff maybe joining them soon as well. All that and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have lots to talk about today. Let's start with the big news on the NHL waiver wire. I do have a dedicated video on this from earlier today on the channel, so if you want a bit more of an in-depth analysis on each of these guys and whether or not they'll get picked up, certainly check that out if you haven't had a chance to already. But we have 3 players on waivers, all I think have some degree of possibility getting picked up here. You got Andreas Athanasiou in Chicago, 1 year left, $4.25 million, 6 games this year, no points. Certainly a player who can play with elite speed. He can play center or he can play wing. So again, I think the contract might be a deterrent, but a type of player that teams normally would like if he was at a better price. Capo Kakinen, the goaltender for the Avalanche, they had a case where they were kind of needing some goalie help. Georgiev was really struggling early on. Now they've got him and Justus Anunen both playing much better, so Kakinen goes back on waivers. And then Matt Benning, the Sharks, former Shark that was acquired by the Leafs in the Timothy Liljegren trade, wasn't really part of their plans. We knew they were trying to flip him or move him to another team after acquiring him and haven't really been able to find a deal. So he's on waivers. I know he's a former Edmonton Oiler. He might kind of meet the criteria they're looking for. He does have an extra year in his contract, though, so that might be a deterrent, but he is well priced, about $1.25 million. So for what he brings, someone who can be a defensive-style defenseman on a third pair, right shot, the contract's not that bad. It's just the second year, whether or not he'd be a great fit. I think he's like 31, I believe, now. So at the end of the day, we'll see if any of these players get picked up at tomorrow afternoon at 2 o'clock Eastern time. Other roster moves today, lots of prominent updates, including the Bruins sending youngster Matt Poitras to the American Hockey League. I wonder if they might end up recalling Max Jones. We'll see, but the Bruins suffered another loss, this time in overtime to the Ottawa Senators. I don't even think it's so much it was the loss. It's how they lost. They ended up having a lead that was blown. They scored 2 quick goals in the second period and take a 2-1 lead. 2-1 lead's never really overly safe, but the fact is that the Senators tied the game late in the second, and the Bruins came out so flat in the third. It's the first time I think that, at least that I can recall, the Senators actually kept the Bruins from getting a shot the entire third period. The Bruins have had struggles with blown leads in third periods recently as well. This was not a one-off situation. Brady Tkachuk almost outshot the entire Bruins team himself. He had 12 shots on goal. Big night for him, including the overtime winner, but then the team on Boston's side only had 16 shots. So they certainly, like I said, they had put together a few wins prior to that game, but they weren't pretty, and there were still things in their game that were problematic, I thought. So we'll see what this leads to. I know there's some that think Jim Montgomery might be on the hot seat. I don't know that besides a potential coaching change, I don't know that there's going to be a whole lot more coming there. If anything, we'll see. But the Bruins, at this point, had been kind of cutting back to the play of Poitras. He had been even sat out a few games, and getting him to the American Hockey League to play a bigger role, more minutes, all situations, might be what's best for him. So we'll see long-term how this works out. In Colorado today, Jared Bednar confirmed that Val Nichushkin will be playing with the team as early as this coming weekend, which is great news. He's expected to be reinstated out of the player assistance program sometime this week and likely will play on Friday. So that's a major boost. The Avalanche record with him in the lineup is significantly better than when he is not there. So that will be a major boost. I just hope that everything that's been kind of worked on, and I hope the program and him is like successful and that he can stay, straight and narrow and keep things going, because he's such an important part of that team. Of course, for lots of other reasons and his own personal well-being and health, you hope everything stays well this time. In Calgary, they announced today that winger Anthony Mantha is done for the year. He requires ACL surgery. That's a big recovery, so he is going to be done. That's a really unfortunate thing. They signed him on a 1-year contract, and I wouldn't be surprised that the whole process around that idea was probably, let's sign him to a 1-year deal, see if we can kind of rehabilitate him, so to speak, and maybe we flip him at the deadline for some extra free assets since he signed him as a UFA. But that will not work out. His season will come to an abrupt end early on in the year. Some updates involving the Senators and the Leafs, as we will have our first edition of the Battle of Ontario tomorrow evening. The Senators will be getting Shea Pinto back into the lineup. He's missed the last, I think, 7 or 8 games with a lower body injury, and he's officially back in, which is good news for them. They also recalled Zach Ostapchuk, who has sent to the American Hockey League yesterday. As I mentioned yesterday, it could have been a paper transaction just to kind of, help accrue some extra cap space, or it could have been a case for him going back with Pinto returning. But with the fact that he was recalled and Pinto was back in the lineup, makes me think that maybe Ostapchuk will not be the one to come out of the lineup. I think Coach Travis Green said that the Bruins game was probably the best game he's seen Ostapchuk play here so far. So he may not be the obvious choice, where he's the rookie who doesn't need waivers, so to speak, to go down to the minors. So I'm not sure what the lineup will look like for the Sens in that case, but it may not be Ostapchuk coming out. We'll have to find out tomorrow. And Austin Matthews, who's missed the last few games for the Leafs, of course, they've been doing well in his absence, is now considered doubtful for tomorrow. There was some talk that could be the game that sees him return, but the latest update makes it sound like it's probably not going to be the case, and might be later on in the week in one of their next games. So we'll have to see. Max Pacioretty, of course, left the last Leaf game, which looked like a pretty serious leg injury. A lot of people speculated it was a hamstring. We don't know for sure 100% that it is the hamstring, but I believe that looks like it's the case. I know Darren Dreger said he was going to be out a while. That was like the term he used. But the official team release says week to week. So we will see. With Pacioretty, probably fair to say, at least 2 to 3 weeks, maybe more. It's hard to say. But again, he seems to be plagued by injuries here the past few years. Thankfully, not as serious as the Achilles injury that he's gone through twice. The Philadelphia Flyers today, of course, in their game tonight, have put Matvei Michkov back in. Ryan Poehling's also back in. Michkov has a goal in tonight's affair as well. So obviously he's responded well to the 2-game sitting out process for him. Jamie Drysdale and Morgan Frost both become healthy scratches tonight. Drysdale's had some rough play as of late, and a lot of people are certainly now questioning that trade involving Cutter Gauthier, and did they make the right move? I mean, Jamie Drysdale's a defenseman that has had a ton of potential. Obviously was drafted with very high possibilities for his career. He was a well-regarded D-man, and I think to some degree, I don't think he's really fallen off that badly, but obviously look at a year ago, he was considered a pretty hot commodity for them to get him out of Anaheim for Gauthier. So we'll see, but certainly having a bit of a tougher season this year, so certainly some concerns over his play, how he fits, and the long-term solution there in Philadelphia. And in Pittsburgh, we're going to talk about the Penguins in a little bit. They're getting absolutely destroyed and spanked by the Dallas Stars tonight. Sam Poulin's been recalled. Kevin Hayes goes on injured reserve. And we'll talk here in a few minutes around the Penguins and if they could be making some drastic changes. Like, their season is getting off the rails early. The team clearly can't compete with any of the team's top NHL franchises, and is nowhere near looking like they're going to be a playoff team. And I know that they've obviously re-signed Crosby. The year before was Malcolm Letang, trying to make one last run with these guys, but it's not working. This team has serious issues, so we'll talk about that further here in just a sec. But first, I want to talk about the CHL and NCAA changes that are going to be coming based on the NCAA vote. CHL players starting next year will now be eligible to play in the NCAA. I know Elliot Friedman on his latest 32 Thoughts podcast was talking about a lot of the questions that this has raised. Of course, we talked about this before, given the fact that we don't know how it's all going to work out, of course, but, at the end of the day, we might see players go to the junior leagues in Canada, play for a couple of years, and then do a year or two of college, and then go to the NHL. It might keep players, though, being able to not go to the CHL, because right now, before this rule change, you played one game even in the CHL. You could not play U.S. college hockey in the NCAA. So certainly that change will be quite helpful in a lot of areas. But for example, right now, one big thing that's different is depending on where players are drafted from determines on how long those NHL teams hold their rights. Right now, players are drafted either out of Europe or through the U.S., like the USHL or the NCAA. They hold their rights for 4 years before being required to sign them to a contract, where the CHL is only 2 years. Friedman suggests that in the next CBA, which negotiations are going to be getting underway here in the not-too-distant future, that's probably something that gets brought up, and it'd be even across the board. Maybe it's 4 years everywhere. I'm not sure what they do, because clearly, you have to think right now you can't have a pro contract and play in the NCAA, right? So is there going to be any changes to that? Because right now, like for example, what if a player currently is in the CHL and has signed his ELC with the NHL franchise that drafted him, but then wants to go to the NCAA? Is that going to be a problem, right? So, how is that going to work? There's work to be done in that sense. And when players go to the CHL, when they first sign their junior contracts, they're not done like on a year-to-year basis. They're not done like 1 year, 2 year. They're done basically that they're going to intend to be, as long as they're eligible, basically, up until the end of their 19-year-old season. So, until when they're turning 20. So, that's a problematic as well. Can they just be released from those contracts if they go to the NCAA, or is it a transfer? How is that all going to work? So more questions there as well. So certainly lots to be worked out, and lots of topics that are going to be, this is going to be a topic we're going to hear lots about over the next several months, because it's supposed to be effective for next fall. And clearly there's lots of work to do and agreements to be made between, not just with the NCAA, but between the NHL and all the other leagues, and, make sure that everything is all worked out and everything's well in place. And of course, like I said, from a collective bargaining perspective, make sure everything is fair across the board here as well, because this is going to be a major change to how players take their path to the NHL and what they do for development. Before we jump back to the Penguins, I do want to talk a little bit about the Montreal Canadiens. There was a big rumor flying around last night that Georges Laraque, of course, former Canadiens player, NHL player of a variety of teams, including Montreal, of course, now media personality for BPM Sports, claimed to have a fairly big scoop, a big rumor regarding the Montreal Canadiens that he was going to reveal today, claimed to have photographic evidence, whatnot. It's been, I guess you could say, I don't want to say it's been debunked, but some other reporters have dug into it and are saying it's not true. But Laraque was saying that he had heard and had the proof that the Habs had met with Gerard Gallant. Now, that it had been around Marty St. Louis, Kent Hughes, and Jeff Gorton were all involved with this. Now, we assume that maybe they were trying to bring him in as an assistant coach. I know there's some heat on Marty St. Louis, but to be honest, I think Marty has such a great relationship with Gordon and Hughes. I don't really see him getting fired, to be honest. I really think if they decide at some point, which is bound to happen at some point in time, but if anytime soon, that Marty is not the right coach for that team, I would suspect that he would probably resign and work with the Habs in a different capacity. That's just my gut instinct on that. I don't think they'd fire him. I don't think they really want to do anything to, really be like that with him. I think he'll know when it's time to let somebody else take the reins. Obviously, Gerard Gallant's a well-respected long-term coach, but a lot of talk, he could be somebody they're talking to as an assistant coach to add to the staff, be a mentor for Marty, and be somebody who can help out with the players. Of course, he has history with the organization as well. He's coached Major Junior before and had a lot of success, so he has worked with younger players, which they have many of. But then there's been some other media personalities. I've seen like Renaud Lavoie, for example, being one of them, who says that they were told that this meeting has not happened. So we don't know. Georges Laraque, I don't know. Not everything he says turns out to be great info, but at the same time, if he claims to have photographic evidence and everything that, it just seems weird of something that he would kind of hurt his reputation on. So I don't know. But the Montreal Canadiens had a big win today, scoring 7 goals and beating the Buffalo Sabres, which was quite surprising. Every time you turn around, there was back-to-back goals in quick spurts. It was kind of crazy in that sense. 12 goals overall in the game. So, they get a win, but it wasn't pretty, that's for sure. Caden Primo had a rough one. Montembeault had to come in late. I still think there's lots to be concerned about in Montreal. And right now, before the game, they were in 32nd spot in the NHL. Obviously, there's move up a little bit with the 2 points today. But, Elliot Friedman on his podcast today thinks that they need to just not worry about it. That he feels that they're not ready to take that step, and they should tank and go for James Haggins, who's going to be the top overall pick in the 25 NHL draft, or at least that's the way it looks right now, and he could be a top-line center for them that might really help progress things. You throw him and Demidov in the mix here in the next year or two, suddenly things look incredibly different. So we'll see about Montreal, but lots of rumors about the coaching staff, but we can't verify that any of it has anything to it at this point, but something worth monitoring considering where the team is at. And there's been tons of rumors, as we've talked about here in recent days, about different trades and whatnot, and I do think at some point we're probably bound to see a few things, but hard to say. I think Ken Hughes is going to be patient and not too worried about this year. I think they're more worried about making the right move for the future and what's best for the club. So we'll see. Now, as I mentioned, in Pittsburgh, getting thumped and getting absolutely trounced today with the Dallas Stars. At the end of the first period, when I started to record this video, it was 6-0. It was crazy. There wasn't even a ton of shots. So a high scoring percentage, high shooting percentage in today's first period of that game. They're already near the bottom of the standings. And in the last 24, 48 hours, there's been a big debate on social media about, could Erik Karlsson be somebody who's moved? Because obviously you look at this team and they're struggling. You expect a drastic move. Could Mike Sullivan finally be let go? He's been there forever. I know that the players really like Sully, and he's been a great coach. The whole time Dubas has been there, has gone on about how great of a working relationship he has with him and whatnot. And it's all fine and dandy, but at some point you need something different. And the coach change is something that's a lot easier to work with than it is making a bunch of trades. Obviously, though, Karlsson's name came up. He's not a long-term Penguin like Crosby or Malkin. So, would they consider trying to flip him? He's got 2 more years on his contract. Was making $11.5 million. They got salary retention under the Sharks, which knocks it down to 10. They might be able to retain a little bit more to obviously to move it to another team. I'm not sure, but a lot of talk on social media. Like I said, it wasn't a rumor from an insider. It was more about the fan. Look, there's a lot of hockey fans and in general talking about return to Ottawa, because we know at times this year Ottawa's right side of their blue line's been a little bit questionable. We know Travis Hamonic won't be there long. Is JBD a long-term fit? Lots of questions there. Artem Zub's been good, but he seems to get hurt a lot. So just lots of talk around. Could this happen? And some of it I think is nostalgia. Some of it is things are much different in Ottawa now. New owner, Alfredsson's involved with the team again. Would it work? Would it not? There was a lot of people talking about the fact that there was bad blood in Ottawa and he'd never go back. I was like, well, that's completely untrue. That bad blood that he had was with teammate Mike Hoffman all those years ago, and that's been long since dealt with. Like I said, Erik Karlsson's wife is from Ottawa. They still have a house there, spend a lot of time in their summers there. They'll probably always live there. Like I said, it's a place they call home and have lots of family there. Daniel Alfredsson is Erik Karlsson's one of his, if not his top best friend. He coaches with the team now as well, is involved again, which is great. Plus he lives in Ottawa. So there's no reason from a personal standpoint, Erik Karlsson, if he were given the option to go to Ottawa, I have no doubt that he would be on board. The only thing right now, I guess you could say, when he went to Pittsburgh, he might have thought he had a better chance to win, right? At that point, that was a couple of years back. So, are the Sens a cup contender right now? No, but they're knocking on the door to be a playoff team. And if, he obviously would have some control because of his contract. Might he, prefer to go to a team that's closer to winning a Stanley Cup? Perhaps, but I think he would be quite content to be, at home and have that nostalgic return as well. The fans would absolutely embrace him in a heartbeat. And is he the perfect defenseman that they absolutely need in terms of the profile and what he brings? No, not necessarily, but I think given the right role, maybe it works, but that's the hard part. I mean, you would need the Penguins to eat a good amount of salary to even consider it, and then what do you trade to Pittsburgh to bring him to Ottawa? Like, it's complicated, right? If he didn't make so much darn money, it would be a lot easier, but the fact that he's still at a $10 million cap hit with 2 more seasons, that makes it hard. Like, my reply was, in the whole social media debate was, I can see him going back. I just don't know that it's going to end up by trade. If he gets bought out and ends up being a free agent sooner, or if not at the end of this contract, I could see him maybe signing a 1-year deal and maybe going back at that point, if it makes sense. They've also got Carter Yakimchuk coming, who was their first-round pick and having a solid year back in junior so far since he returned to the Calgary Hitmen. Again, so I have a hard time seeing the perfect fit and how it could work. I understand the nostalgia. Of course, I was always a huge Karlsson fan myself. I'd love to see it, like, just from the fact of how things ended and that he could go back. It's a great idea, great concept. But when you look at the roster and where does he fit and how does it work, how does the money work, it seems very challenging. And then it said, well, what if he signs as a free agent in 2 years when his contract is up? Okay, well, maybe. But then where do you put him at that point? I guess it's hard to say exactly where the rest of the D are, right? So it's really hard to say. It really is difficult to plan that far ahead. But right now, is it likely? No, I just think it's really complex, really complicated. And as much as you like to see that nostalgia, it's hard to find the perfect fit. But if it did happen, I think fans would go nuts for it and would be welcomed with open arms. And I absolutely think he would go, no problem. But that's what I think. Let me know what you think. Does it make any sense at all for the Senators to try to bring back Erik Karlsson with everything going downhill in Pittsburgh? There's bound to be some drastic moves coming here sometime soon, you have to think. And if he's one of them that they want to talk to about moving on, does that make sense to you? And what would the package or trade have to look like for it to make sense for both sides? Let me know what you think down in the comments, and we'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, of course, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.